The real deal?
Affairs of the Heart is brought to you by Supermed Pharmacy. Super happy, super healthy, Supermed. The Ministry of Health and Wellness. Healthy people, healthy environment. Dewars, here's to the story. And Durex, distributed by Massey Distribution Limited, Jamaica.
Trauma can impact more than just your childhood. It can shape your future. Tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. as we broadcast live from the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation Lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma, on April 2. Join Professor the Honorable Wendell Abel, a leading expert in psychiatry, as he explores the long-lasting effects of childhood trauma and the path to recovery. It's an important conversation you don't want to miss. So tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday, April 2 for the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation Lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. Register now at Grace Kennedy Foundation's Eventbrite page to watch the live stream. Don't miss it. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a touch, oh, what a job, oh, what a peace. How great this country could be. Respecting your rights, respecting human rights.
Good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk Justice. I am Jade Williams, Policy Research and Advocacy Manager at Jamaicans for Justice. I am alone today. Normally, our Executive Director, Michael Jackson, would be with me, but she sends her apologies to our listeners. She's feeling a bit unwell, so we're wishing for her a fast recovery so she can join us again next week. All right. For today's show, we're going to be covering two topics. We're going to start off discussing a bit about participatory democracy. And then a bit later in the show, we are going to be joined by Her Excellency Judith Slater, the British High Commissioner, who will be speaking a bit about the Commission's work here in Jamaica, promoting human rights, and where we still have left to go. All right. So to get started, I think I will mention just one thing coming out of last week. Not necessarily a news-related item, but certainly something that I think is important to highlight. Last week, we would have completed our second of two town halls on improving police and citizen relations. So last week's was in the Kingston Central Division, and we were able to have join us representatives from the Police Civilian Oversight Authority. The Divisional Commander, Beresford Williams, was there, as well as Assistant Commissioner of Police Clifford Blake. We had Justice of the Peace present. So we would have had a fulsome discussion on strategies that have already been implemented to improve police and citizen relations, and those that we can look towards implementation for in the future. So that was a great discussion. Sorry to those who were not able to make it out, but we will be hoping to post a bit more about what came out of that town hall on our social media pages. So keep watching that as the weeks go forward. All right. So we'll go into our right of the day for today, which is actually a Did You Know? And it speaks to our constitutional reform process. And really, in line with our topic for today, or Did You Know? Speaks to the fact that in 2022, we would have had a constitutional reform committee established. And that committee, as we should know by now, if you are a viewer of this show, was established to review and propose changes to the Constitution. And we know that there is a bill now being debated in the Joint Select Committee. But what is important to a process like this is robust public education, but also participation in the process to ensure that it is truly reflective of the will of the people. And this is most important in a process like this reform, because as we know, this reform ends actually with a referendum. At least this part of the reform will end in a referendum. So the will of the people would need to be very well represented to ensure that that referendum is successful. So that's one of the useful positions that we have there in terms of public participation. And we'll be talking a bit more about what that means and why it is important a bit later down in the show. At this point, I'll also ask our trivia question. So our trivia question for today, another easy one. Last week was easy, this week is easy, so we should get a quick winner. Which Jamaican legislation grants the public access to government information, ensuring transparency and civic engagement in governance? So, which Jamaican legislation grants public access to government information, and that would ensure transparency and civic engagement in governance? So, you'll be able to respond to this by sending us a WhatsApp 2397583, responding in Nationwide's YouTube chat or on our Instagram pages at JA4Justice. So our substantive topic for today is strengthening participatory democracy in Jamaica. And as we know, democracy is more than just casting your vote every few years. It is about active participation in decision making at all levels of governance. And over the years, the Jamaican government has taken steps to encourage greater civic involvement, such as an opening of a parliamentary committee meetings to the public and the press, as well as establishing joint select committees of parliament to refer bills, allowing civic organizations and special interest groups to continue to contribute to the legislative process. However, despite these efforts, many Jamaicans are still feeling disconnected from that political process, and voter turnout outside of general elections remains low, and opportunities for everyday citizens to influence policymaking go underutilized. So the question we're asking today is, what is holding people back? How can we make our democracy more inclusive and engaging for all Jamaicans? So we are going to be joined by Dr. Maziki Thame, who is a political scientist associated with the University of the West Indies, and I believe she is with us now. Dr. Thame, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well, and you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Thank you again for joining us. I think we'll open the conversation just very simply. When we talk about civic participation, participatory democracy, public participation, what are these terms covering? What do we mean?
Okay, before we get to participatory democracy, I think it's useful to give some background to the development of the idea of democracy in the first place. Mm-hmm. And what we have settled with, which is really representative democracy, whereby we elect a representative to secure our interests in whatever the government system may be. They should seek to put in place legislation, that is, our representatives, that essentially are representing our interests. There is also, in the Western world especially, a focus on liberal democracy. And in the context of liberal democracy, what we emphasize is the protection of individual rights. So we want to think about Caribbean democracies in those lights. We certainly have had a history in which questions of human rights in governance has emerged, questions about the extent to which our democracy is actually liberal. And there is an extent to which there is discontent around representation, and we see it in low voter turnout, for instance, what we might call political apathy, disinterest in participating. Now, in the context of representational democracy, elections are considered the height of activity insofar as that is the main means by which people participate. That is, choosing your representative is the main means by which people participate. But for scholars of democracy, for countries around the world that are more interested in, a deeper level of participation, governments would typically seek to put in place measures that would lead to direct participation of the public. And, there are various ways in which that can be done. You said that earlier. Local government is meant to be one of those ways in which it is achieved, the extent to which communities themselves are politically organized. And by that, I don't mean in partisan terms. I mean, they form organizations that would represent their interests and go through the channels that lead to, solving their problems or putting forward measures to parliaments, legislatures that would then lead to, for example, changes in the law. When we say participatory democracy, then we want to think about it at the level of what is the best way to get the most participation of the public, not just in elections, but also in the broader frame of decision making.
Okay. So with that context, where are we in strategy implementation to achieve greater participatory democracy?
I'm not sure what you mean by strategy implementation because, I'm not sure that we have an agenda per se about participatory democracy in Jamaica. There has been discourse in academic circles. For example, Brian Meeks's work is always trying to focus on the measures like implementing a national assembly that would be a sort of popular body in which not just people in Jamaica, but also its diaspora could participate in debating bills, in putting forward agendas for change, etc. But we don't have those sorts of measures in place. And even at the level of electoral democracy, we are now faced with the problem of low levels of participation. So I'm not sure that we are actually working on changing the context. And, where you started, the question of, what is holding the public back? Why is it that they don't even want to participate at the level of elections? Is, I think, something that would tell us why it is that there is this low level of democracy in general in the society.
Has there been any research into the things that are affecting voter turnout?
I am not aware of any recent work on political apathy in the Jamaican case, but bear in mind that we are a largely young democracy, and that the ways in which democracy has been conceived of in the Jamaican, or even before we get to democracy, independence. In the Jamaican case, scholars have written on independence as, constitutional decolonization. Trevor Monroe, that is. Louis Lindsay has written on the low levels of mobilization of the public in determining what our politics looks like. And so if we look at it from the perspective of how independence came about, what were people's expectations, and how the politics was shaped within a frame in which the popular understanding was that democracy and independence would alleviate especially the socioeconomic challenges that people faced, and that you get to 50 years into independence and you're still asking questions like, are we better off? Why is the politics corrupt? We are thinking about levels of distrust within communities and also in our government. There is a sense then that, and we've in the past also discussed whether or not this is a sort of failed political project. And in those frames, it may result in a context where the public simply chooses to disengage or they express themselves in other ways. In other societies, protest action would be an indicator of participation. What we have here in Jamaica is high levels of internal violence, which we could see as a form of social protest. So it's really about, what are the expectations of the public and whether those expectations are being met. And there is a generalized sense that it is not the case that the politics fulfills the aspirations of the Jamaican people.
I'm seeing a comment in our YouTube chat here that from one of our regular viewers actually saying that most of their friends have told them that when they vote or not, things aren't changing. And so they have given up on both representations, government and opposition, whichever party holds that role at the time. And so they no longer vote. I can understand that perspective to some extent. Having participated, for example, in joint select committees, and you make your recommendations and you hear the recommendations come from multiple places and it's considered and then not implemented, it does feel a little bit disappointing as a citizen to even see the places where you do participate. You may not get the kind of result that you're expecting. So I wanted your comment on that, but we are at the break, so if you'll just stay with us when we come back from the break.
Sure.
How many times have we seen people reveal the most personal and intimate parts and places they do in the public domain? Then boops, all Dolly House mash up, and they're requesting privacy during this time. How must people be asked to respect your privacy when you haven't even shown it to yourself? How important is it for couples to be seen in the public space in order for validation and acceptance to be proof? Why do some partners insist every moment must be revealed? What is the relationship rate of success for those who are public versus private? What are the pros and cons? Join me, Rodney Campbell, every Tuesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. for Affairs of the Heart, right here on Nationwide 90 FM. This Tuesday's topic: if we're not all over social media, does that mean our relationship isn't the real deal?
Affairs of the Heart is brought to you by Supermed Pharmacy. Super happy, super healthy, Supermed. The Ministry of Health and Wellness. Healthy people, healthy environment. Dewars. Here's to the story. And Durex. Distributed by Massey Distribution Limited, Jamaica.
Big news! The Big Bite Food Safety Show now airs on Nationwide 90 FM with your host, Alison Richards, the Food Safety Girl. Join Alison every Tuesday from 1 to 2 p.m. as she serves up expert advice, tips, and insights on everything food safety. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember, food safety is everybody's business. Don't miss a bite of the action. Tuesdays at 1 p.m. only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. On the next episode, we'll explore from standard to safety, the role of accreditation and certification in food safety.
Trauma can impact more than just your childhood. It can shape your future. Tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. as we broadcast live from the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma, on April 2. Join Professor the Honorable Wendell Abel, a leading expert in psychiatry, as he explores the long-lasting effects of childhood trauma and the path to recovery. It's an important conversation you don't want to miss. So tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday, April 2 for the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. Register now at Grace Kennedy Foundation's Eventbrite page to watch the live stream. Don't miss it. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We've been discussing strengthening Jamaica's participatory democracy, or at least our efforts towards that. We are joined by Dr. Maziki Tame, political scientist from the University of the West Indies. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about those things that have influenced voter apathy. And I was sharing with you, Dr. Tame, a comment from our YouTube chat where citizens are speaking to, feeling as though when they vote, that vote does not go towards the changes that they were hoping to see. How do you respond to those kinds of comments?
Well, the question is, what exactly is the voter voting for? Mm-hmm. When a person votes in an election, we know that they're voting for a political party, but we don't necessarily know what is the change that they want to see, which raises other questions about the character of the political party system, mm-hmm. and whether that party system is itself democratic. Whose interests do parties represent? and how does the broad public relate to the party system in order to get the party to defend their interests? I think you referenced, participating in joint select committees. Part of the problem when we assess this at the level of civil society and civil society involvement, that is really thinking about, specific organizations being party to a process where these organizations themselves are encumbered by the extent to which they are powerful in their own right and the extent to which they're connected to the mass or masses of the people. If you think about Jamaican politics in the period of the 1970s, where we could say that there was a national movement that was clear in terms of what its goals were. You had a multiplicity of organizations which were not NGOs per se, but they were communities organizing to defend their interests. The women's movement, for example, was very strong in the 1970s, and they had particular legislative agendas, such as the move for a maternity leave law. We can't say that that exists in the present, and that is partly a result of the impact of neoliberalism and the defeat of the political left in Jamaica in the 1980s. And so, again, I go back to the question of, what does a national stage look like? And whether we should be thinking about democracy more than just voting in elections. A vote in an election is just the start. We want to know what is happening in the 5 years in between and what measures are existing within the institutions of the state that would allow citizens to participate as groups, and especially as groups, because what we are interested in is broad levels of representation.
I hear you use that term neoliberalism. What does that mean for the purpose of our listeners?
So neoliberalism is largely thought of as, an economic system. It's an economic phase of capitalism whereby the market or the laws of demand and supply are freed. And presumably, the market will always find equilibrium and the price will be right. Now, historically, this has to do with the relationship between economics and the role of the state. Historically, up to the 1980s, it was understood that the state should play a role in intervening in the economy in such a way as to defend the interests of the majority of peoples. That's what democracy was understood as. In the neoliberal period, what was advanced was that the state should minimize itself. It should become less and less involved in especially economic issues. And certainly that is an area where we need to have discussions about, whether there needs to be a democratization of the economy as well. But in the neoliberal period, the state played less and less of a role intervening on behalf of the broad majorities of people. And so during that period, you began to talk about, NGOs, civil society, rather than mass movements. And these movements, which historically had sort of, mediated capitalism, that is the interests of those who have wealth, which plays a tremendous role in democracy. We're seeing that especially now it's everywhere, but it's showing itself at a very heightened level in the United States. But in the neoliberal period, those kinds of questions were no longer asked. The state was just to facilitate the private sector, and the rest of us would benefit through growth. Trickle-down economics.
Yes, trickle-down economics indeed. So, I guess I will ask, we have been on this trajectory for quite some time, this capitalist train where we have gotten to this point now of a neoliberal democracy. Is there a turning back point? Is there a mitigation that we could be implementing now as we are considering our governance reform? We're looking at our constitution, we're looking at ways in which we can change, improve our governance. Is this the space for that?
I mean, there are, broad transformative changes that are probably more ideal, but also incremental steps that can be taken, such as constitutional reform. But as it relates to the problem of constitutional reform and the way it has been unfolding, what we did not have was a broad participatory process. We didn't have a process whereby the public was actually saying what it felt and making demands, which relates to the state of the public in general, the fact that there's an extent to which political education is weak, people's understanding of even how to get things done in their democracy is weak, and that governments don't necessarily put in place mechanisms to allow for people to participate. I know JFJ has done some work, having town halls, and those town halls serve as important places of political education. Those kinds of measures can be more popular, as in people can organize themselves, they can invite people to educate them, they can have their own reasonings and push back against government's decisions to keep these processes exclusive. There is, some onus on us as the public to take responsibility for the direction that our democracy goes in. If we allow, government to do as they please, then in the end, we may wake up one day, as Bob Marley would say, in a curfew, or in other words, in an authoritarian society. And those dangers are very real presently because of what is happening in the United States. And whatever happens in the United States also impacts what happens in the Caribbean, both in terms of standards of governance and in terms of how the public responds when they are defending their democracy. So one of the ways in which we might think about the possibilities for Jamaica and the Caribbean at large in the future is by observing how the American public responds to Trump's power grabs, and whether we ourselves become, energized by those processes, whether we begin to think about what is happening or unfolding on the ground in Jamaica and seek to organize ourselves, because nothing prevents us from doing that.
Yes, you're right. Thank you for your perspective on that. See, I think as we're looking at our global political state, and looking at the ways in which we can take our incremental steps, one of the gaps that we found here, just in our work with the public at JFJ, as you rightly said, is a lack of political education, but not just that, just general civic education, general understanding of our systems and so on, making it then impossible to be able to comment on those systems. But we do hear what should I say, the complaints, the disgruntlement of citizens when they engage with that system. How can we bridge that gap between what they're experiencing and bringing an understanding of that in a more formal way so that something can be done about it?
Well, I'm not sure I'm clear on what your question is, but I want to speak broadly to the relationship between an institution, NGO like JFJ, and the public that it represents. NGOs operate in narrow political contexts, and by political, I don't mean party politics here. I mean broad political in terms of negotiating power. And so any single institution is going to play a narrow role in terms of, achieving the ends of reform or democratization, etc. But as it relates to, what is the constituency of any institution that is engaging in political life, I would say that one of the things that it has to seek to do is to, and this has to do with its legitimacy to speak for the public, is to have, a broad-based support, so that it's not just politicians that are involved in creating constituencies. It's also those entities that they say they are representing the interests of the people they have to have those people engaged in their processes. I give you a concrete example of this. In the post-apartheid period in South Africa, the women's movement was able to the ANC women, the African National Congress women, were able to get legislation passed within their parliament. And if you think about how politics is patriarchal everywhere in the world and women have less power than men, etc., this represented a tremendous victory for them. And one of the ways in which they were able to do this relative to other countries with even higher levels of female representation is because they were on the ground in communities. It's because they had a mass movement that they were representing, and when called upon, that movement could show up to make demands on the state. So I would say that all institutions engaged in, political activity have to ensure that they are, their legitimacy is in no way questionable insofar as they actually have a sort of broad base of support for the communities that they represent.
Thank you for that, Dr. Tim. We're at the break. I'm just going to ask you to stay with us for 5 more minutes so you can give your final word when we come back from the break.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
31 degrees in Kingston, 29 degrees in Montego Bay.
Commercial spaces for you. Parks and attractions for you. Housing and residential developments for you. Beautiful rental properties for you. Improving quality of life through infrastructure development across Jamaica for you. The Urban Development Corporation, making development happen for you. Brought to you by the Urban Development Corporation.
UDC for you.
Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. Stay ahead of the curve with our cutting-edge reporting and accurate breaking news coverage.
We're having an earthquake. Oh, God.
Hear it here first on Nationwide 90 FM. Tune in, turn up the volume, and listen. We bring a mix of news, entertainment, and sports to your lives.
Nationwide 90 FM's live and continuous coverage of the World Championships in Budapest, Hungary.
News and discussions week mornings.
Coming up in the news at 6 for this morning.
Entertainment in the afternoons, then news again in the evenings.
Nationwide news at this hour, fired.
Also tune in to the entertainment and sports shows in the nights and on the weekends.
It is Boy Things After Dark right here on Nationwide 90 FM.
Everything is news, from current affairs and entertainment to sports, business, and other categories.
Nationwide 90 FM. This is Beanie Man. Give it to them. Zaga, Zen.
From every whisper to every commotion.
That's rubbish. The KSAMC cannot investigate itself.
Every news story unfolds here first at Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. Every sound is a story, and every story we share is news.
News on the go. The latest stories from Jamaica and around the world are literally a finger tap away. Keep up to date with Team Revolution 24 hours a day online via nationwideradiojm.com. Listen live, read the latest stories, hear every soundbite. Be a part of the vibrant online debate via Facebook and Twitter. Now you can get all your favorite premium Nationwide content at your convenience. Visit the Android Play Store and download it for free today. NationwideRadioJM.com. All day, every day. Team Revolution.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We've been discussing participatory democracy in Jamaica, or lack thereof, and we are joined by Dr. Maziki Thame. As we've gone over so many different points on this topic, but I just wanted to get from you your final word as we continue on what is a process. We are in an election year and we are undergoing our constitutional reform process as well. How can we strengthen our participation generally as citizens?
Well, I would say more politics, not less. And by that, I mean people must put themselves in the conversation. They must not be silent. They must organize themselves in groups. They must study their constitution. They must learn about how their government works. They must, begin to make demands on the state so that the interests of the state represents the interests of the people. But first, today is the last day to get enumerated, and people have to start there. But they should not remain silent in the 5 years of electoral turnover. And when their institutions that they think are valuable in keeping democracy alive don't work well or are under fire, it is the responsibility of the public to defend them.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Thame. That was Dr. Maziki Thame, political scientist at the University of the West Indies. We were discussing strengthening participatory democracy in Jamaica. And I would just like our listeners to know JFJ has its Know Your Rights simplified constitution that speaks to some of these processes, speaks to the rights in your constitution. It also speaks to how your government is structured. And so you can have that understanding. We also have a simplified version of our constitutional reform submissions. So you can go ahead and visit us. If you pop up at any one of our community interventions, you'll be able to get a copy. But that is there for you to educate yourselves and participate in the process. Now, we're moving into the second half of the show, and we are joined by Her Excellency Judith Slater, who is the British High Commissioner to Jamaica. She succeeded Asif Ahmad as the British High Commissioner to Jamaica on October 13, 2021, and she's our first female British High Commissioner to Jamaica. She was Consul General in Istanbul and simultaneously HM Trade Commissioner for the Eastern Europe and Central Asia, covering 14 markets. Prior to this, she was Deputy High Commissioner and Southeast Asia Regional Director of Trade and Investment in Singapore until 2015. Her previous posts include Deputy High Commissioner in Pretoria, South Africa from 2007 to 2011 and British Consul General in Houston, Texas from 2004 to 2007. In the FCDO in London, Judith's posts have included Private Secretary to the Minister of State responsible for relations with Asia and Head of Nuclear Policy Section in Non-Proliferation Department. She has also had an overseas postings in New Delhi and Canberra. She has a law degree from St. John's College, Cambridge, and attended Howell School in Denbigh. So she's with us today. Commissioner, High Commissioner, thank you for joining us.
Very welcome. Great to be here.
All right. So we wanted to have you on the show because we know the British High Commission has been playing a role here in Jamaica in human rights. And I know you have some specific programs and partnerships, including a program that Jamaicans for Justice would have benefited from as well. So if you could share with our audience some of that work that you've been doing.
Sure. Well, thank you very much indeed for having me. It's great to be here. And it's great to be on the radio show that I think we've funded some episodes of.
Yes, you have.
Which is wonderful. Yes. It wasn't to do any self-promotion. But no, it's really good to be here. As you mentioned, I'm sure your listeners didn't need to hear my entire CV. It makes me feel very, very old indeed. But no, I've been here for nearly 4 years now. So we've been doing a lot of different programs. As part of, as a friend and partner of Jamaica, we provide funding for in a variety of areas. And this is one very important area. And I wanted to talk particularly about the Magna Carta Fund, which is a British human rights fund that it's for programs all over the world. And we saw this and we thought this is a great idea for us to bid for some money to do some work here. And we managed to secure £60,000, which in Jamaican speak is 12 million Jamaican dollars last year. From the Magna Carta Fund, and we were able to give this money to the Equalities for All Foundation, so EFAF, and Jamaicans for Justice. So I think this partnership, this program has been done with the two organisations in partnership, and this is to help promote human rights. And the program's called Protect and Serve, and the aim of the program is to increase access to justice by fostering a positive relationship between vulnerable groups and the police. Excuse me. And the focus has been to help improve relations between police and these vulnerable groups, and vulnerable LGBTQ but other groups as well, through public awareness building and sensitisation sessions on human rights. So we've done sessions the organisation has done sessions in Kingston and in Montego Bay. And the sessions have been about human rights and about the JCF's diversity policy. And so, in other words, to help people to understand how to report any human rights violations. But on the other side of the coin, it's been about helping the police, sensitising them to enhance their understanding and to help them to deal with the vulnerable groups. So it's all about the two groups being able to work more in harmony together and hopefully raise awareness on both sides. And actually there's been some great participation from both the police and the vulnerable groups. And just to mention a few of the things that have happened, there's been these sensitisation sessions which I mentioned. There's been 3 community interventions within marginalised communities and groups. There's been some awareness raising and police training with the JCF. And then, as I mentioned earlier, 10 episodes of Let's Talk Justice radio show on a variety of different human rights issues we've been sponsoring. There's public education materials, videos, infographics and all of that kind of thing. And there's going to be quite a involved social media campaign. That hasn't gone live yet, but when that does go live, we're looking forward to there being really good participation in that. And that will obviously give us, some really rich feedback data to see how it's all been going down. So it's been running now for a few months. It's coming to a conclusion with the social media campaign, but I really hope it's going to make an important contribution to the work in this vital area.
Well, I can say from JFJ's perspective, we've been positively impacted already. Even just last week Friday, I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but we would have had a town hall with our police officers in the Kingston Central Division. We also did one in the St. Andrew, I want to say North Division. But yes, and we would have had excellent participation from the police there. The divisional commander of both areas would have been present, speaking to the citizens able to, air some of the concerns that they've had in their specific areas. And the police were able to respond, and coming out of that, it was an excellent session. So we really appreciate your support in being able to get that done. We would have also seen some of our community interventions where having informed citizens now of their rights when interacting with the police, we have gotten some improved reports of their experience seeking services from the police as well. So again, that support has been integral.
And another one I wanted to mention, if I may, is the work we did last year with UWI, with the University of the West Indies. This was under a slightly different fund, our Enabling Equalities Fund, but this has been a really important piece of work helping students understand about what actually constitutes sexual harassment and to help bring people together to prevent occurrences on campus of sexual harassment. And as part of that, we helped the training of 50 trained peer advisors who are now available to students. And I went to the launch of that one, and I think that's, in a slightly different way, but also an equally important part of the work we've been doing. So that was something that we did last year. And then, of course, human rights entails people's, people's right to feel safe in their communities. So I think our much bigger and broader violence prevention program, which this is VPP as we're calling it, and we've been involved in this area for a long time in Jamaica, as have some of the other big donors. Really, really important work. And we've been focusing on there, some of it doesn't sound all that sexy. There's a lot of work going into data and how data is brought together holistically so that interventions that are made in the best places, the most needy, all sorts of different bits of data, bringing it all together, which is all about making sure value for money, of course, of that important taxpayer money that is well spent. And then we're doing quite a lot of work, as I know, because I've heard it from your new education minister, Dana Morris-Dixon, literacy.
Yes.
This is about helping to give kids other options than joining gangs, for example. So if we can help kids leave school with better literacy, then their life chances are better, and they will have other options than criminality. They will hopefully be able to go and find jobs, what I would call real jobs.
Yes.
And also in the classroom, as well as the literacy side of things, there's also been some psychosocial interventions.
Mm-hmm.
So to help improve behaviours so that everybody can learn, and so that kids are able to benefit as much as possible from their schooling. So there's different aspects to this. There's the violence prevention sort of overarching programme has lots of different strands to it. So all of this really comes together, I hope, in a way that's very supportive to Jamaica.
Yes, yeah, and it does sound very holistic in terms of all the areas in which you have been able to touch and intervene. We're going to take the break. When we come back, I'll just ask for your final comments on your intervention here.
To Marshall's Pharmacy today for your free medication management consultation. Let us guide you in taking care of what matters most, the health of you and your family. Shop now for gifts, personal care, household and stationery items, plus print services powered by Print Corner. Follow us on Instagram at Marshall's Pharmacy. Call or WhatsApp us at 876-491-7841. We are open late every day to serve you.
Trauma can impact more than just your childhood. It can shape your future. Tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. as we broadcast live from the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma, on April 2. Join Professor the Honorable Wendell Abel, a leading expert in psychiatry, as he explores the long-lasting effects of childhood trauma and the path to recovery. It's an important conversation you don't want to miss. So tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday, April 2 for the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. Register now at Grace Kennedy Foundation's Eventbrite page to watch the live stream. Don't miss it. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. In this final segment of the show, we've been discussing the British High Commission's contribution to human rights work here in Jamaica. We've been joined by Her Excellency Judith Slater. I just wanted to get your final word on the work that you've been doing and where you're going in the future.
Sure. So just to repeat for those that might have missed it, so we've put 12 million Jamaican dollars into into both Jamaicans for Justice and the Equalities for All Foundation for the Protect and Serve programme, which has been helping bring vulnerable communities and the police closer together so that they understand each other and both understand what their rights, FID, Integrity Commission, as part of our broader work to support Jamaica. So it's been a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much
for joining us. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for sharing your work with our audience. And we look forward to continue to partner with you.
Thank you so much.
All right. So we're in the final part of the show. We are going to be talking just a little bit about our initiatives that we've been doing over the past week or so. So we would have seen, we had 2 police trainings since we would have had High Commissioner here. I'll talk a little bit about that work. So we would have had 2 police trainings in this year with 2 different divisions. We trained over 40 officers and we were able to impart with them some general information, not only on human rights of citizens, but also engaging directly with citizens, use of force, And even touching that body-worn cameras issue, we've covered all of these things in the sessions, and we made sure to focus partly on treatment of vulnerable groups, and that would include persons who are affected by domestic and gender-based violence, persons who are affected by HIV-related discrimination or other kinds of HIV-related violence. So what I found coming out of the training, the officers are extremely receptive. Extremely receptive. Of course, we would have had some back and forth about the way citizens themselves have engaged with officers. And it's not something that we are unaware of. We know that there are times when the citizen has initially responded to an officer in such a way that it is extremely disrespectful and therefore would have resulted in a less than positive interaction. But of course, we will continue our work with the citizens as well. We have some trainings coming up this year with our citizens on interacting with the police, but also knowing your rights. We find that when you know the rights properly and not just what you think the rights are, you are best able to ensure that not only do you not infringe on anyone else's rights, but you also are able to maintain and uphold your own rights and know when they are breached. Also coming out of those trainings, we would have seen some improved interactions with these officers in terms of reaching out to us, giving reports, participating in any initiatives that we may need to partner with. I know last week at the town hall we were able to join with the domestic violence intervention group of police officers that is coming out of this St. Andrew Central, Kingston Central, division. And that has been some good engagement as well. So we look forward to continuing our partnership. And we now go to our trivia for today. I am looking in my producer's chat to see if it is that we would have received our trivia winner. Oh, yes, so we did. So it was news commentator again. I'm not surprised. But our trivia question for today was which legislation... Actually, let me read it. Let me read it. So the question is, which Jamaican legislation grants the public access to government information, ensuring transparency and civic engagement in governance? And the answer to that was the Access to Information Act. The Access to Information Act is one that we have had since 2002. And as the trivia says, it is there for us to be able to get that publicly available information. So if it is a ministry, if it is a government agency, if it is a company with 50% shares or more in this government has 50% shares or more in that company, then we are able to seek information from that company. So you can do that. You can call them, you can email them, you can send a written request. There are many ways in which you can make an access to information request. And if you are watching our social media pages, you would have seen a few posts going out over the past few days about access to information. Jamaicans for Justice will be working on that act for this year, and we are encouraging citizens to make their requests. We will soon be able to facilitate that for you. So keep watching our social media pages, looking out for information on how to make requests, as well as looking out for that little portal that is on its way, or Right to Know portal, to assist you to understand what the process is and how to participate in the process. And we encourage citizens, even before we get there, be sure to use the legislation as best as you can. As I said, it is not something that you need to formalize any of your requests for. You can simply call the agency that is responsible, and one of the responsibilities that they have, even if you call the wrong agency, is to pass you on to the correct agency. So you wouldn't have to do all of that work to search through where the information should be. The state should help to facilitate you getting access to information by searching for that proper place and transferring you to that proper place, or your request to that proper place, so that it is handled. I think a final thing I will say to you as we are closing out the show is that when you are using the Access to Information Act, you do not have to give a reason for making your Access to Information request. As a Jamaican citizen, you are entitled to this information. And unless it is information that is confidential, meaning it is sensitive personal information, it is legally professional privilege information, so it was information between yourself and your lawyer, or it has anything to do with your DNA, those private matters, of course you wouldn't be able to request that. So you're not going to be able to request your politician's medical records, but you will be able to request any of the contracts that the Ministry of Health would have gone into for the year 2023. That kind of information is publicly accessible and available information. So use your Access to Information Act, encourage persons around you to use it, and take advantage of your right to know, your right to seek, disseminate, and distribute information in Jamaica. So, we have 5 minutes left in the show, but I do want to say thanks to the Commonwealth Foundation as we spoke about the Access to Information work. They have been funding that work, and we look forward to continuing to work with them so that our Jamaican citizens can have the information that they need. And we also again thank the British High Commission for their efforts in supporting the organization through the Magna Carta Fund and all of the work that we've been able to do through that. And our audience here on Nationwide would have benefited from that work as well, as you would have seen a few episodes of Let's Start Justice focused on our human rights and police and citizen relations. So you can go back if you missed those. They're on our YouTube channel at JA4Justice. And we had one that I think everyone should see with Otara and Clifford Blake, who are from iProbe and the Police Citizen Oversight Authority, and it speaks not only to the responsibilities of police officers, but of citizens to ensure that we have good police and citizen relations, and it also speaks to where there is issues with police and citizen relations, where you can go to seek that redress. And we all know that JFJ is one of those places, but of course iProbe is there as well as the PCOA. All right, so we are at the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will be back next week. I'm Jade Williams, and this was Let's Start Justice. Thank you.
Justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
How many times have we seen people reveal the most personal and intimate parts and places they do in the public domain? Then boops, all Dolly House mash up, and they're requesting privacy during this time. How must people be asked to respect your privacy when you haven't even shown it to yourself? How important is it for couples to be seen in the public space in order for validation and acceptance to be proof? Why do some partners insist every moment must be revealed? What is the relationship rate of success for those who are public versus private? What are the pros and cons? Join me, Rodney Campbell, every Tuesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m.